Hello and welcome to Beebe Book Buzz. We, your Wakefield librarians, are back, and we're back in the studio in WCAT, and we're very excited to be here. My name is Karen Stern, and I'm here with Brigid Black and Jeff Klapes, all members of the reference department, and we're going to talk about some books that we've been reading lately that we wanted to share with you in hopes that you can find your next great read. And today we're going to start with Brigid.
Ooh.
You have some excitement for us.
Yes. So I'm going to start with The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri, which is the start of an exciting new fantasy series by Tasha Suri. So if you're looking for your next epic fantasy read, this might be the one. So this is set in a fantastical version of India, sort of fantastical India, with just really exciting world building. So it unfolds so well through the book, that you're sort of dropped into this new world and you learn about it through the character's experience in such a skillful way that it never feels like info dumping, but you also never feel lost and without any knowledge of what's going on. So as concepts emerge that you need to be explained, they might be mysterious for a little bit, but then gradually they are revealed to you, the reader. It has a big cast of characters, as a lot of these epic fantasies tend to do, but the main characters are Malini, who is a princess of sort of the whole world, which is called Parijat, which is the empire that she's in. And she is a princess who is living in exile because she refused her brother's request to burn herself alive, which he has reasons for this that are related to the mythology of their faith, but also he is a despotic person who dislikes her personally. Okay. So it is both that he justified his personal reasons with sort of a mythological reasoning, and the other main character is Priya, who is a maidservant in the abandoned temple that Malini has been sent into her exile in. But Priya has a lot of secrets, which are revealed throughout the novel in ways that really illuminate her to the reader and make her very interesting. So she's much more than she first appears. And it's just really well done, incredible characters. I really rooted for these characters so much, though as I've described it to other people, it is about nobody is all right or all wrong. And Malini and Priya do develop a romantic relationship as well. So that is there is a romance in there, skillfully sort of weaved through everything else that feels really organic and natural when it comes, but it's hard. But also kind of doomed, you can star-crossed, exactly, because the for reasons that are the place where Priya is from does not actually want to be a part of this larger empire, and has had a long history of conflict, which is illuminated through the character of Priya and also through another character, Bhumika, who has a long-standing relationship with Priya, who is married to the sort of regent of the area that we're in. So we learned a lot about these characters as you go through. And I don't want to say too much, because the surprises are one of the wonderful things about the book, is
discovering
these characters' connections and pasts as you read it. So it's really a book of discovery.
Twists and turns of plot, or more backstory sort of thing.
So it's both. This has, again, as some of the very skillful, it's very skillful setup for future books. So that's why there is a lot of backstory that you need to find. But also, as you're moving through the present plot, things change. Characters reveal themselves to be not who you think they are at first. The connections between them are more complicated, or sometimes they're even less complicated than you really would think. And just very...
So a lot of surprise.
Yeah, so a lot of surprise. I gasped out loud reading this book.
That's saying something.
Yeah, there were parts where I was like, "Oh my God, that happened!" And just there's something I don't want to, but there's a late sort of reveal, or that is teased through the whole book, that we are sort of teased with this reveal that's going to happen. And when it happens, the characters are so shocked, but the reader is also like, even though you might have expected, you're still like, oh my God, it's actually happening in that way. And just really, really good. And I describe this as for fans of morally gray lesbians in epic fantasy times, this is the book for you. Like, that's what.
Is the place, like you mentioned India, is it really fantastical, or do you get a sense of the culture of India today, or is it just?
I think that it is quite fantastical, so I don't know how much sort of real culture of India today it is, but that's definitely like the root, the as opposed to a sort of a medieval fantasy world. Yeah. It's much more rooted in
something Southeast Asian, or is it? Do they mention India? I mean, is it?
Oh, it's definitely they do not mention India. It definitely does not take place in our world in any way. It is definitely
all right.
I guess the term is a second world fantasy where it doesn't it isn't here.
Okay.
So it's but that's certainly the base,
the cultural
base of it, yeah. Okay. And lots of and obviously, like the names, like I said, the names are driven from Indian culture, and food, like there will be like food you recognize and things like that are sort of from there.
Got it.
So
sounds great.
Yeah.
And leaves you hanging for the next one?
Yes, very much sets up for a sequel that is coming. It even right on the side it says The Burning Kingdoms Book 1, which definitely means there's a Book 2.
Do you know when it's coming?
I am not sure when it's coming, but I think next year possibly. Definitely leaves you, like, it is a complete story. I think that this will leave you satisfied for some of the story that they're telling here, but there is certainly more story to come. But you aren't left completely. There are plot threads that are wrapped up. There are things that are
well,
answered.
It's a big enough book that they can do.
Yes, exactly.
It's a good-sized book. How many pages is that?
I believe it is about 400 and something.
Oh, is that all? Okay, I would have said that was 600.
Nope, 530. I am wrong. Okay. 530 pages.
But a fairly page-turning read.
A pretty fast read. It really draws you through because you really do like want to know what happens next, and since in the same way Game of Thrones does sort of POV characters where you follow like one person for a chapter from their sort of limited point of view, that's what this does.
Okay.
And so if you see, sometimes you're like, I want to get to the next like Priya chapter, I'm here in a different person chapter, so that pulls you through as well.
Is there a lot of action? Is it like, is there like not sword fighting, but you know what I mean? Is there like the equivalent of it's interesting because it does both. This is, I would say, like it does both sort of the like courtly intrigue kind of fantasy where it's like the machinations and those types of political stuff,
maneuvering, but also there is fighting and there is.
And is there magic? Is there actual magic?
There is actual magic.
Okay.
There is actual magic.
Now we know our terms. We know our limits of the fantasy world.
It's there's a
lot. There's a lot in
there. There's a lot in here. It's extremely rich. That's why I'm saying it's just so. I loved the way that the world building is explored through the characters and through the action that happens, as opposed to just kind of
being told
to you, or like getting like. In the old days, this happened. It's like when you find out about the past, you find out because characters are interested in it and because characters are explaining things.
That reminds me of.
I prefer that.
Jemison is like that. She's so good at just there's always has to be some explication, but she's so good at just like.
But it
things
evolves naturally rather than feeling like it's told to you.
It never feels told. And
sound like Dickens.
And this is Tasha Suri's first like a book written explicitly for an adult audience, but she does have a YA trilogy that is sort of set in magical Middle East. That is a lot of people really like. So this isn't. So it definitely isn't her first book, but it is her first like adult book. So she's moving in like a little bit of a different mode than she had before.
Okay. All right. We should probably move on, and we're going to do something very different from very long
Not 530 pages.
to very short. I am getting up and doing the short story thing again. Every once in a while, I jump up and down about short stories, and I talk about why don't people like short stories? Why don't they read them more? I don't know. What do you think? Do you think?
I think more people were reading them in the past couple of years because I think our attention spans changed. I know mine did.
Sure.
And
certainly a lot more people are writing them. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got like a stack here, and there's just so many people coming out. Like with poetry, I don't know, the short forms seem to be very popular at the moment. And I know that a lot of people feel that they can't kind of get invested in the storyline if it's not 530 pages that they can really sink into. But I just kind of want to say, really, they can be really good and satisfying and fulfilling stories.
And not all of them are fragmented. Some people write stories where the collection has some thread that ties them together.
Right. Yeah. I think of it like like an album, listening to a whole album, where the songs are meant to be listened to.
Exactly.
Well, obviously very well, Jennifer Egan's A Visit to the Goon Squad is really a bunch of connected short stories that just tell one sort of story.
Right. And now these are, I would say, the ones I'm going to talk about today are a little bit more separate stories, although they certainly do have themes that tie them together. So the two I want to talk about today are The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Philyaw and A Trib and Other Stories by Ellie Williams. And I ended up deciding to talk these two together because even though they're really different books and about really different things, there is something that ties them together, this sort of an intimacy about both the subject matter and the style of the way they're each written that just kind of made me think, wow, there's a reason that that I like both of these books, and I do like books that are talking to you, about relationships and families and friendship and love and disappointments and personal stuff, things that are everyday, things that we all go through, but at the same time, because they're happening to you and you're getting the details, they feel momentous on some level. So it's this kind of juxtaposition of the everyday and the momentous, and that both of these books have. And there's always a sense with both of these authors that you're getting this sort of the secrets and the inner thoughts, and they're being shared with you, the reader. You are there talking to the author. I think both of these have that. In the case of Secret Lives of Church Ladies, there may be some selective sharing going on because every one of the stories involves a different secret that's being kept or something that's being hidden in some way. And publishers' blurbs are not known for always getting it right. Sometimes they get it really wrong. But this one actually sums it up so well that I'm just going to read this one little paragraph. Secret Lives of Church Ladies explores the raw and tender places where Black women and girls dare to follow their desires and pursue a momentary reprieve from being good. The 9 stories in this collection feature 4 generations of characters grappling with who they want to be in this world, caught as they are between the church's double standards and their own needs and passions. And that is, so that does run through the book. What I love about this one is that it feels so real. She really gets the voices right. And there are many different voices in this book. Some are young, some are old. They're all women. A lot of it is first person, but not always. Sometimes it's like an omniscient narrator, but you always have the feeling, again, that the narrator is talking directly to you, or you're right there in the room with them, in the hotel room, at the kitchen table. Your friend is telling you about, why she can't quite commit to this guy, or, it's, I would say almost a sense of a little bit of voyeurism, that kind of the chance to peek behind the curtain of somebody else's life, which is intriguing about it. It's like reading People magazine, only better because it's even more, in depth and real.
Do any of the characters know each other, or are they really separate?
Between stories, no, not in this one. And I don't want to make it sound like it's all gossipy and superficial either. It's not that. The emotions are real and very deep. And And the other theme that really runs through this is this generational shift that is the reason for the title, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, is that, these are all, a lot of these women are struggling, or girls are struggling with their parents' relationship with their mothers, mostly relationship with the church. And there's a generational shift between the mothers and the mothers who are believers and the daughters who are more questioning or possibly non-believing. And then all of the things, we're not just talking about God, we're talking about how you live your life. Your sexuality comes into it a lot, what you have to hide and what you can show. And so there's all those kind of juxtapositions. Anyway, very good, very readable, very accessible, totally accessible. Like I said, it's like you're talking to a friend. Highly recommend. And then this one, A Trib, is equally intimate, but totally different in style. Ellie Williams, you may know her from the Liar's Dictionary. It's been quite a hit recently. She's obsessed with language. She loves the English language and meanings and double meanings and etymologies and stuff like that. And so she plays with language as she's talking, and it's a sort of it's stream of consciousness kind of, and if she thinks of a double meaning, she'll kind of go off on that tangent, and it always comes back around. She's very clever. She's very clever about how she writes it all. But it's also very personal. I mean, she's like, all these stories are usually talking to someone who is called you in the story. And you kind of feel like it's you, the reader. But it's usually someone she's in love with, someone she's just fallen out of love with, or fell out of love with last year, or broke up with on the phone, or something. But that you is always right there. And I don't know, the tone of this is hard. I think just weird and wonderful is what I would say. There are a lot of stories set, she does setting really well. So some of them are just in her bedroom, which sounds boring, but isn't somehow. There's a lot of them on the London Underground, because she's British, I should have said that. But, and that's kind of fantastic. Well, for me, it's fantastic because I lived there and I love, there's something about about undergrounds and metros the world over, right? I mean, it's where life kind of, all these bits of life come together and weird things happen in undergrounds. So there's this one story where she's in her bedroom, actually. She's looking at a blown up photo on the wall of this ex-lover of hers who about a year ago she took a picture of as she was saying goodbye to for the very last time. And the woman's getting on the train. And this is now a year on in her bedroom looking at this photo, which for some reason you're trying to figure out, why does she have a blown up photo of an ex on her wall and still there after a year, and she's still looking at it after a year. And she realizes a year later that she also caught this other thing happening on the opposite platform, where a gust of wind picked up a guy's toupee off his head, and she's managed to capture this toupee on the way to be hitting this other guy in the face. And so here's this story, and it's about saying goodbye and loss and all these things about the relationship, but it's also about trains and platforms and toupees that kind of look like squirrels flying squirrels, and it just goes everywhere. It's a lot of fun and a little bit of a whirlwind, kind of this unfiltered flow of the musings of your mind, only it's not your mind, it's her mind, and her very kind of quirky, funny, unexpected mind. So not a dull moment. You might not always know exactly what's going on in this book, but it kind of doesn't matter. You just keep going and you find out. Anyway, you might think that all that unexpectedness is not really your thing, but the great thing about a short story collection, getting back to my soapbox, is that you can always turn the page and start a new story, and it's likely to be something really different, and that's the refreshing thing about short stories. So keep one by your bedside, is what I say. So yes, and there are many others. I can put some in the credits that are out there right now. Jeff.
Me? I'm not actually going to talk about this book, but I just have to do a quick plug for a book I just finished, like earlier today, that I have to mention, just because it's so quirky and so weird, it's called Mother for Dinner by Shalom Auslander, and it's the funniest book about cannibalism you will ever read. But I have to say, it was also, not only was it laugh out loud funny, but it was also very thought-provoking. It's actually, it's hysterically funny, but it is actually about tribalism, and it's about cannibal Americans, an ethnic group or an immigrant group that's trying to assimilate, and the problems they've had, and the younger generation not wanting to keep traditions going. And so it actually raises a lot of interesting issues, but it's so funny. Anyway, so if you're into cannibalism, like,
or if you're not, or you just want to find out more.
But you just want to find out more. It's, I may talk about that in more detail the next time around. But the book I really want to talk about is this one called The Lamplighters by Emma Stonex, which is totally different, not funny at all. And I picked it up because she's a British author, and she's actually written quite a few, I think 8 or 9 books already under a pseudonym, but this is the first book that she's written under her own actual name. And it's atmospheric is the first word that comes to mind. I picked it up because it was on a list of good literary fiction that's come out this year, and I was looking for something like that. And it is very beautiful, very elegantly written. It's not the kind of inaccessible literary fiction, but she's got just the most beautiful turns of phrase. But it's a mystery. It's a suspense story. And I'll just read a couple of quick little excerpts. She says, "There are 2 kinds of people. The ones who hear a creak in a dark, lonely house and shut the windows because it must have been the wind. And the ones who hear a creak in a dark, lonely house, light a candle and go take a look." So it's actually inspired by a true story. It's about a lighthouse, although this is completely fictionalized. She points out that the story that it's based on was just a starting point. There is nothing about this that really is connected to that true life story. It takes place on an isolated lighthouse off the coast of Cornwall called Maiden's Rock Light. And it's not even an island. It's basically just a rock and a tower.
And a tower. Is that a real place?
No, not as far as I can tell.
Okay.
And the premise of the story is that there were 3 lighthouse keepers stationed out there in the early 1970s. And in the winter of 1972, 3 lighthouse keepers disappeared from a Cornish sea tower miles from Land's End. In their wake, they left behind a series of clues: an entrance door locked from the inside, 2 clocks stopped at the same time, and a table laid for a meal uneaten. The principal keeper's weather log described a storm circling the tower, but the skies inexplicably had been clear. So it's a mystery. There's almost a supernatural sense to it. Most of the story focuses on 3 couples, the 3 men who were stationed there, and their wives who were left behind. So there's Arthur and Helen, Bill and Jenny, and Vince and Michelle. And the whole story is told almost like pieces of a puzzle. So there are flashbacks to when the disappearance actually happened, and then 20 years on, when a fairly famous author, published author, decides he's going to write a story and investigate what really happened and write the definitive story of the disappearance. So he comes up and wants to interview people, but it's such a great character study because the three men have their own issues, and the 3 women who are left, each of them dealt with the disappearance and the tragedy in a very different way. And they either moved on or they didn't. And so all of these puzzle pieces, which are the flashbacks, interviews, news articles, things like that, that very slowly, as you read the book, they start to coalesce into maybe an answer. And I won't tell you whether they arrive at an answer or not, because that's part of the fun, is seeing. There's a lot of hints of paranormal, and so it's interesting to see whether that's going to pan out or not, or whether it's just in someone's head. It's all about how the women in particular have decided to move on with their lives or not, and whether they're lying to somebody about what they know, whether they're lying to themselves. So it's a really great psychological study of how people deal with this inexplicable mystery. And of course, behind it all, there's sort of an evil corporation that runs the network of lighthouses.
Right.
And of course, they don't want to look bad, so they've kind of controlled the way information has come out over the years and paid off people and stuff. So the mystery is just, it's fascinating because it's a believable mystery.
Right. I was going to say, it feels almost like one of those true crime TV series coming out. Or not true crime because it's not true, but it could make
you can
TV.
totally picture this being like a Netflix series where where it's very
I can hear the music
atmospheric. You can
already.
hear the music, and
There's like the the light go
Yes,
like there's
yes.
the light going in the background.
yeah. And I think if you, I'm trying to think of read-alikes too. If you were trying to think of people who are sort of like this, I would say Sarah Waters would be a good comparison. Julian Barnes, another British author who writes sort of very well scripted character studies. Shirley Jackson, a
So
little
is it
bit.
more about character than place? Because I mean, the place feels like it would be
the
a
place
thing.
is so powerful in
Okay.
this, but it really is character.
Right, because for place, I would think something like the light between oceans might feel
Yeah,
that there's that
it's certainly about isolation because so
which
much
is
of the
what that one
story
is
is about the three men isolated on this tower for long periods of time. They, often the weather prevents people from getting supplies to them and that sort of thing. So, what is it like to do a job where you are perhaps for weeks at a time stationed in this tiny little place where you can't even go outdoors? But
Yeah,
there's also
that's-
the isolation of the women who live in cottages provided by the company that are way out at the end of Cornwall, and the isolation that they feel when, after their husbands disappear, how do you go on with that? You're still isolated because they didn't die, but you don't know. Nobody knows what happened to them, so it's hard to move on. So it's all about how each of them deals with their own grief, how they deal with each other. It's fascinating. I could not put it down. There's not a lot of action in it, but you can't, I just had to constantly find out what happens next.
right, and you're not going to tell us even whether there was a resolution. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
All the way through, even up until like the last 30 pages, I was wondering, are they going to leave me hanging, or are they going to actually tie it up? And I won't tell you whether they do or not, because
Okay.
that would spoil
No,
some
no,
of
that's
the suspense.
That's a double suspense. Yeah. Just
It's interesting to me that the disappear. I feel like you never think of the lighthouses in the present day, kind of. So it's like that the disappearance happened in the 70s.
Yeah.
Is I would have thought
there
like
are still England
1910.
still has a
Yeah.
huge culture. Well, not huge, but it's a
Yeah.
small culture, but it's of lighthouse keepers.
Yeah, because a lot of lighthouse
Shrinking,
stories do
but-
take place in the 19th century or that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So this one was kind of interesting because it's just at the tail end of when that culture was dying,
Yeah.
and these were basically the last lamplighters
But they
before
still
things
have
started
the
to get
sh- you know,
automated.
They have the radio. What do they call it? Not the shipping news. That's.
Oh, yeah, the
but
shipping
they have the
forecasts.
shipping forecasts,
Yeah.
and those all are based on the lights. Like the lights are very much still part of English
Yeah,
everyday life in a way, because you get those.
Yeah,
Some
it's-
people can recite them, in order of appearance on the radio.
It's just it's just not something that
No.
you think of, because almost all fiction also is set in like at least the first half of the 20th century.
so if you want something that's kind of almost like Daphne du Maurier, that real gothic,
That's what it feels like. Yeah.
gothic ocean mists and stuff, and a real English feel to it. Yeah, I absolutely loved it.
Great. Well, that was a good selection. And it looks like it's time to stop. So I will say goodbye for now, and we will see you again next month on Beebe Book Buzz. Thanks for joining us.